my husband Ryan was leaning in close to an unfamiliar woman, exchanging sweet nothings with a sticky sweetness. Then he said to her with a clear voice, "Will you marry me? Oh my! I'll make you smile for the both of us in place of my crying ex-wife and my parents." My father-in-law tapped the edge of Ryan and the woman's table with his finger. Both my mother-in-law and I stood up and followed suit. Hello, we're the dearly departed parents. And I'm the one who's supposedly the late ex-wife. At that moment, Ryan recoiled so forcefully that he nearly toppled his chair backward. My name is Natalie Thompson, a 32-year-old housewife. No kids. Not even a hint of them on the horizon. So now my family consists of just the four of us, my husband, my in-laws, and me. And it looks like it's going to stay that way. I hardly have any complaints about my daily life. I enjoy my job, which I've had since before I got married, and my in-laws are kind. So I can safely say I'm pretty content with my everyday life. After all, I've known my current in-law since I was a kid. My own parents passed away in an accident when I was in college. Being an only child, I was lost when they suddenly left me. The people who helped me through that tough time were the Thompson couple, my current in-laws. At the time, my parents' relatives were all living far away, accessible only by plane. So the Thompsons, who had been friends with my father since his college days, flew in to take care of the sudden funeral arrangements. And afterwards, they helped me with everything from inheritance issues to sorting through personal effects and dealing with the family home. A couple of years into my job, they suggested I marry their son, Ryan. Honestly, I wasn't particularly in love with him. Ryan was a childhood friend 6 years older. But naturally, being of the opposite sex and with the age difference, we never really connected. I remember going out to play with him and his parents when we were little. Even then, he was at the age where he'd go off on his own, and I hardly ever saw him around the house. So when the talk of marriage came up, I didn't really have a clear image of him. But when the beloved Mrs. Thompson said to me, "It's about time you settled down and got married, you know," I found myself agreeing despite being weak-willed and not particularly interested in men, let alone ever making the first move. The Thompsons were thrilled and approached Ryan with the idea. And Ryan, if that's what Dad and Mom want, replied in his typical nonchalant way. I had my reservations about what marriage entailed. But a quick arranged meeting was problem-free. More than anything, having the Thompsons as my in-laws was a great comfort. Comfort to me back then after we got married. My father-in-law approached me with a proposal. "Hey Natalie, I'd like us to formally adopt you as our child, just in case something happens to us." Why would you say something so unlucky? Well, to be honest, you never know what's going to happen in life. I know he was referring to my parents' sudden passing. Life is unpredictable. I'm all too aware of that. Of course. I know that you, Natalie, can stand on your own 2 feet with your job. But it seemed his worry was more about Ryan, my husband. Our relationship had always been rather superficial. I never expected any passionate love. But I did want children. Having lost my parents early, I longed for a big happy family. It seems my mother-in-law felt the same. She regretted only being able to have Ryan and treated me, a mere daughter of a friend, with such affection, probably seeing me as the daughter she never had. That's probably why she hoped I'd have many children. But reality isn't so kind. Even if Ryan and I were healthy and capable of having kids, having children requires certain conditions. Yes, a marital relationship. It was scarce even during our honeymoon phase. Now, after 7 years of marriage, we're completely without intimacy. My father-in-law seemed to have a faint idea that Ryan was the cause. The direct reason for the lack of intimacy was Ryan's terribly late homecomings. Sometimes he wouldn't come home at all. If he would say it's for work, I couldn't be too harsh since I've been there myself. I heard that Ryan was always a workaholic even before our marriage, with many late nights and early mornings. Still, sometimes I wondered if he was cheating. But I never found any sign of another woman on him or his belongings. So I decided to snoop around Ryan's room a bit. I wasn't forbidden to enter his room. I'd look around while cleaning, checking for anything suspicious. There was one place that caught my attention. That was his desk drawer. While the rest of Ryan's room was open, that drawer was always locked. But one day, I noticed it was ajar. Was it unlocked? Curious, I decided to take a peek inside. Several notebooks, tightly bound with a long closure string, and a passbook from an unfamiliar bank were there, along with a seal. It seemed impossible to restore the notebooks to their original state, so I decided to open the passbook first. Tentatively looking inside, there were nothing but records of money transfers. Over the years, the account which had been used contained a substantial amount of money. But there was one pattern. The names on the transfers were always women's names. Deposits would cluster during a certain period each year. After that period passed, the money would be switched to a fixed deposit, leaving only a little in the checking account. Then, money would be transferred again from someone. It was strange, too strange. What in the world was Ryan doing? But at that moment, all I did was take photos of every page to keep on hand. I thought it dangerous to confront him with accusations just based on my suspicions. Why did you go through my desk without permission? Ryan would probably just lash out at me for that. I saved the photos on my smartphone. But at that time, I thought maybe I should just forget about it. I had no particular complaints about our life, except that I never really felt Ryan's presence at home. Then one day on my way back from work, a woman stopped me. She introduced herself as Charlotte Brown and said, "I used to date Ryan for a little while." Seeing me freeze in shock, she suggested we move to a different location. Instead of a deserted place, she took me to a moderately busy family restaurant. I was relieved. "I already have someone with me," she said, and marched straight inside. Waiting there was a lawyer. What is all this? Don't get it wrong. Natalie, I'm not out to get you. In fact, I want to help you. Help me. Take a look at this. The lawyer showed me photos she had right there. They showed Ryan looking cozy with several women. So this means my husband is cheating? Huh. If it were just cheating, it would be cute. Charlotte sighed heavily. The lawyer continued, "Yes, cheating would be cute. What he's doing is marriage fraud." I was stunned. "What do you mean?" "Ryan Thompson has proposed marriage to 5 women, including myself, getting them to buy real estate or take out loans, and then pocketing the money for himself." Isn't that a crime? Yes, a crime. And I was the first one he duped. I couldn't refute as the evidence was laid out before me. No, I think I had already considered it wouldn't be odd if Ryan was accused of such things. And then I also showed them the photos of his bank account. Yes, this is my deposit. She pointed to a specific part of the enlarged photo. Indeed, it was printed with the name Charlotte Brown. I see. So you called me out here on purpose. Must have some plan in mind, huh? I need your help. Or do you still have feelings for your husband? I silently shook my head. Probably was never really liked in the first place. Just needed an excuse for the company to see him as a married man. That's good to hear. And then she made a proposal to me. That weekend, I took my in-laws out for lunch. What's the occasion? It's rare for you to invite us. Just thought it would be nice for a change. Heard from a friend about this lovely restaurant. Wanted to share it with you both. In truth, I had been thinking about dining out with my in-laws occasionally. But is this some kind of surprise? Wanting to dress differently than usual? Yes, normally my father-in-law wears casual suits and my mother-in-law dresses sporty yet elegant, but today I had them dress a bit differently. Perhaps like returning from a wedding. At least it's not an everyday outfit. I too dressed to match them appropriately. Yes. Well, considering the season, with Halloween and all, a bit late, but in that spirit. Of course, that was just a pretext. It's a slight disguise so that a certain someone won't recognize us. I changed my hairstyle and wore big fake glasses. Inside the restaurant, there were a few women and their male companions scattered around, enjoying a relaxed lunch to the sound of laid-back music. Ah, this is nice for a change. It really makes you feel younger. You're still young? We should go to places like this more often. While we were having this pleasant conversation, the doorbell rang. Table for two. Right this way, please. They arrived. I glanced at the entrance, something I don't usually do, from under my glasses. It was Ryan and his companion. My father-in-law started to get up silently as they passed by. But I gestured with my hand and whispered, "Shoo!" They soon got the point of the disguise. The two of them sat down and started choosing from the menu, whispering sweet nothings to each other. They probably didn't notice the change in the atmosphere around the other customers. Eventually, as lunch was wrapping up, Ryan leaned close to the woman sitting opposite him and said, in a clear voice, "Will you marry me? I'll make you happy for the sake of my late wife and parents too." I see. Hearing this, my father-in-law quietly stood up. "What's going on?" my mother-in-law whispered to me. "Shall we go over there too?" I smiled brightly. My father-in-law slowly approached them. At that moment, Ryan and Rachel had created their own world. Maybe because of that, they hardly noticed my father-in-law approaching. My mother-in-law and I quietly stood up at that point. My father-in-law tapped Ryan's table with his finger and while taking off his deliberately worn hat said, "Hello, your dead parents here. And likewise the late ex-wife," he added. At that, Ryan recoiled so forcefully that he almost tipped over in his chair. "What do you mean?" "Ryan, Rachel, the woman sitting with us, whose full name seems to be Rachel Lawrence according to Charlotte's investigation, looked back and forth between Ryan and us, barely managing to utter those words. Then my father-in-law bluntly cut in. "There's no this or that about it. Hey Ryan, what's this about a late ex-wife and parents?" "Well, it's just a pretext." "A pretext? You mean a lie?" Rachel seemed utterly confused. "Calm down." With that, Charlotte moved behind Rachel. Remember me. The woman you swindled money from 7 years ago." At that, the women who had been quietly seated all stood up simultaneously. Then, one by one, they began to gather around Ryan's table. "Do you remember me? It was 5 years ago. I met you 3 years ago. And I 2 years ago. Oh my, am I the most recent? It was just last year." Meanwhile, Charlotte was moving Rachel in her bag as far away from Ryan's reach as possible. Rachel, either stunned or indifferent, offered no resistance. And then I said, laughing despite myself, "Not dead at all. I'm his wife legally speaking, you know." Because it was true. So ridiculously, hilariously true. What a scene! What's going on? Ryan, do you know these women and your parents? Rachel was full of questions for Ryan, obviously baffled. No wonder. We hadn't told her anything. Maybe I should have warned her earlier that she was being deceived. But would a woman smitten with love listen that easily? Well, that's what Charlotte said anyway. I couldn't understand it myself, but that seemed to have been the mindset of those women back then. So, I decided it was time to expose Ryan's antics and put an end to this fake romance once and for all. Hey, what's this in a public place? Aren't you bothering the other customers? Dear customer, Ryan's flustered voice was interrupted by a calm voice echoing round. Right! In a place like this? Today the premises have been reserved exclusively for Miss Brown's group. And you, sir, are also part of that group. Therefore, we will not interfere with any discussions or moderate parties inside the establishment. Are you kidding me? Ryan threw a glass he picked up towards the manager. Of course, compensation for any damages is a separate matter. As the manager gestured, other employees quickly came out with brooms and dustpans. Please, take your time. Me and the 5 women nodded emphatically. We got permission from the manager and arranged several tables and chairs around Ryan's group. Then we seated him in a position where he couldn't move easily. Hun, what have you done? Mom! Rachel, looking at this, was also clearly astounded. Ryan, you kept saying you were lonely because you lost your parents and wife in an accident. Was all that a lie? And that's, well, it's obviously a lie. If you think it's a lie, look at this. I pulled out our family's household register. There was not a single mark indicating anyone was deceased. A family of 4, all listed with the latest date. No way. More importantly, Rachel, have you been giving this man money? Eh? Rachel quickly rummaged through her purse in shock. I didn't. I gave it to him. Can you take a look at this? Hey, stop. That's what she brought out was her bank book. I handed it over to Charlotte's lawyer, who had been waiting. Yes, indeed, several transactions under the name Ryan Thompson. This year alone, $20,000, $30,000, $80,000. What for? I wonder. The lawyer called over the manager to make copies on the spot. The manager readily agreed. He told me he wanted to forget everything and start a new cafe and needed money for that. Actually, I was prepared to give him more today. One of the women gently placed her hand on Rachel's shoulder. When it was my turn, he said he was getting married for the first time, but had issues at home and needed a guarantor for a new place. Asked me to do it in my name for buying an apartment. The other women looked shocked. When he approached me, he said moving to the countryside was a good idea, talking about buying property there. Me, he asked if I wanted to own my own shop. For me, it was a house far from downtown. Said he had no relatives and ridiculed me. And in my case, it was being a guarantor for his debts. That last comment was from Charlotte. Do you know how much I struggled after you abandoned me? I met the manager here, explained everything, and even though we got married, my anger towards you never faded. Indeed, this venue being rented out as a stage for condemnation was because it belonged to Charlotte and her husband. The manager, while being gentle, spoke in a tone that showed no mercy. Probably for that reason, the copier was already prepared. The manager handed Rachel back her bank book and also gave her a warm towel to wipe her tears. He then distributed half of the copies to the lawyer and the other half to the women present. As they took them, they nodded gravely and said to Ryan, "Ryan Thompson, you're under arrest for active marriage fraud." At that moment, I couldn't help but want to laugh. Yes, the women there had brought the police as their companions. Charlotte had gathered several women, consulted with lawyers, and then brought the case to the police. It wasn't just a civil matter, but a criminal one. It meant there were still people actively being deceived. The police had mobilized to catch this habitual criminal. The struggles Charlotte had endured to get to this point were unimaginable. The day we first met, when I heard everything that had happened to her, I couldn't help but cry, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the police. "Well, what are you talking about? This is just between the two people involved." First off, proposing to someone while your own wife, who has solid evidence like a marriage certificate, is right there. It's clear you intended to deceive. The lies you've been telling were just confirmed by Rachel Lawrence here. And then there's this. The detective held up a copy. This is evidence of the money you claim to have transferred to that account. A quick check with the bank will confirm everything. But, Ryan slumped against the wall of the store as if all his strength had left him. Then, as if struck by a thought, he turned to me and asked, "Hey, Natalie, we're a couple, right?" Right, we are. But I brought this today because I wanted you to sign it." I pulled out a divorce form with my signature from my bag. "No, I don't want to do that. Anything but that." "Oh, why's that?" At that point, Ryan's father-in-law leaned forward. "Why don't you want a divorce from Natalie? You've neglected her all this time, and now what are you saying? Looking for more money now, Dad? You are gonna help me, right? I'm your only son after all, Mom. You'd be lonely if she left after the divorce, right? You'll oppose it, won't you?" Brian was desperately clinging to the very people he had ignored until now. "Look here," his father-in-law sighed heavily. "Haven't I told you Natalie's already been adopted into our family?" "What, huh? You forgot, didn't you? Oh, she's the only daughter of one of my best friends. We promised to look after each other's kids if anything ever happened. So after you two got married and she lost her relatives, we went ahead with the adoption." "So you mean, even if you leave after a divorce, Natalie will still be our daughter? This can't be. What about Mom? I wish I could still consider you my son. but I don't recall raising a child who deceives and swindles women for money. I escorted my mother-in-law, feeling uneasy, to a quieter seat and stayed with her. To the officers, please take him away quickly and let him face the consequences of his actions. Thank you for your cooperation. Wait, just sign this. I don't want to. If you don't do it now, we'll have to take it to court in mediation. Yeah. Ryan let out a cry. Then, as if resigned, he snatched a pen from the lawyer and signed the divorce form. Happy now? I received the divorce form with a big smile. As Ryan was led away, shoulders slumped, the women all high-fived each other. Then the lawyer began discussing what to do next with Rachel, who was still tearful. So that's why he wanted to have lunch? It was all for this. Sorry, it kinda turned into a bit of an ambush. No. I had a sneaking suspicion that Ryan was up to something. Upon saying this, the father-in-law crossed his arms and looked up at the ceiling. With Ryan, he always managed to one-up every bad thing I could possibly imagine. It leaves me with nothing but sheer amazement rather than sadness or despair. Is that how it is? Maybe that's just the way it is. Afterward, Ryan was formally charged and sentenced to prison in the trial. After all, he had swindled money from 6 people, including Rachel. With different amounts and methods in each case, they were treated as separate incidents, so there was no chance of a suspended sentence. Looks like he'll be behind bars for a while. Whether he's inside or out, he still has the obligation to repay the women. That includes the fees for the lawyers and private investigators they hired. But in reality, a substantial amount of money was left in his bank accounts. What was he thinking? The father-in-law muttered, looking at the bank book he had pried open. After all, there were hardly any signs of him spending the money, just accumulating it. What was left was the bank deposit and a notebook tied with a string. Inside were detailed records of his plans and actions. And they were meticulously noted. At this point, it feels like this was his hobby or something. Even with the bank deposits he showed publicly. Ryan really only spent his money and time on his company, home, and marriage fraud, doing the bare minimum in other aspects. Susan, it seems like this wasn't really about how we raised him, was it? I guess not. The mother-in-law murmured, shivering as she looked at the numerous notebooks. Yes, the notebooks contained records from not just recent years, but far back. Even from his middle school days, continuously. Though not marriage fraud, it was always something he set up for others, with detailed records of the process and outcome. Was that the reason he was never around when he came to play as a kid? It's pointless to say now, though. Even as the case came to light, I continued working at my current job. Being adopted doesn't mean a change in name or family. The fact that I divorced and the terrible things my husband did were known, but due to the nature of the case, I received more sympathy than anything. To our future! When the verdict was announced, me and the 6 other women rented out Charlotte's place again and had a quiet party. Naturally, I couldn't invite my in-laws, so it was strictly a ladies' gathering. If you all hadn't been there at that moment, Rachel sincerely thanked everyone. No, you bringing forward that evidence was what led to his arrest on the spot. Really? Yes, really. The party that day was a great success. Since then, we've stayed in touch, adding a bit of color to my otherwise mundane life. From now on, I might as well call them my parents, not just in-laws. And I look forward to a happy life with my strangely acquired friends.